So we're offering a mandala. So what does that mean?
Итак, мы подносим мандалу. Что это значит?
We're thinking the Buddha is right here.
Мы думаем о том, что Будда прямо здесь, прямо сейчас вместе с нами.
And actually, if we understand the meaning of Buddha, it would be true. The Buddha is here.
И если мы понимаем значение слова Будда, то это будет правдой. Будда действительно присутствует здесь с нами.
And clearly in our talks, we're going to be discussing what a Buddha is, because that's the end result of all this hard work.
И далее мы будем обсуждать, что такое Будда, потому что именно это и есть результат нашей тяжелой работы, достижения состояния Будды. Нам нужно знать, что это такое.
So a mandala is really just visualizing all the wonderful things of the universe.
И мандала — это просто способ визуализации всех самых замечательных и прекрасных вещей, которые есть во Вселенной.
I mean, speaking simply.
Ну, если говорить по...
So we're going to imagine, just use our creative imagination and in our mind pile up all the marvelous things of the world and then simply offer it to the Buddha as a request for the teachings.
И мы просто здесь используем ваше воображение, то есть мы просто представляем себе все вот эти сбор всех этих прекрасных, самых чудесных вещей, которые существуют во Вселенной, и подносим это Будде, подносим это Буддам, прося у них учений.
So imagine this as Vladimir sings the prayer.
И вам следует представить эту визуализацию, это подношение, пока Владимир будет петь молитву.
Okay, go.
Начали.
So now we imagine Buddha very happily receives our offering.
И мы представляем, что Будды очень с большим удовольствием и счастьем приняли наше подношение.
So here we are, our second session together, and what we're discussing is the general topic is meditation. But mostly what we did last week, we needed to give a bit of background, you know. I mean, that word, anybody can use that word, anybody can make up their own meditation. Buddha doesn't own the copyright on it. But we are talking here about meditation in the framework of understanding Buddhism. So clearly we have to get a bit of background. So mainly last week we talked about, you know, the goal of this entire process of being a Buddhist, to become a Buddha. I'm sure I mentioned that. And a Buddha, the word Buddha, I think we discussed the etymology. It's very tasty. The first syllable, Bud, implies the eradication from our mind of all ego, all fears, all neurosis, all suffering and its causes. This is the long-term result, okay? And then secondly, not only that, if we're on the Mahayana path, we can cultivate da, the second word, Buddha, the second syllable, implies the development to perfection of all the other part of our minds. Love, compassion, intelligence, goodness. And this is implying Buddha's entire methodology. In a sense, it's very simple, very clear when we understand this. This is the end result of all this work. So obviously, if we can rid the mind of all the neuroses and we can develop in the mind all the goodness, we had better know the Buddha's view of the mind. And that's what we discussed last week. It's not physical. It is not a function of the brain. It's got much more subtle levels of cognition. It's got this incredible result. It's an outrageous result. Sounds like science fiction. And crucially, it is not the handiwork of mummy, daddy, or God. There's no view like that in Buddhism. And our mind certainly just didn't begin in the mother's womb. Nothing can come from nothing. If it's not sourced in the parents, it's not physical, and it's not sourced in a creator, then where does it come from? It comes simply from previous moments of itself. There's a term in Buddhism, mental continuum. There's this continuity, of mental moments, this river of mental moments, if you like. So this is where the whole view in Buddhist philosophy and psychology of reincarnation comes in. This is fundamental to the big picture in Buddhism. So this mind of ours, and the word consciousness is used, broadly speaking, is used synonymously. So if it is true that we can rid the mind of all the suffering and all the misery, and I mean, who wouldn't want that? And we can develop all our goodness and our virtue and our intelligence to perfection, I mean, it sounds pretty amazing, then we better know what the mind is, and we better learn to know how to navigate the mind. And this is where meditation comes in, So like I mentioned briefly last week, I implied, we've got these many, many misconceptions in modern culture. I mean, many different ideas, put it that way, about what meditation is. You can say it what you like what it is, but if we're going to talk Buddhist meditation, we better be clear. So like I said, from the Buddhist point of view, there's two modes of meditation. Two ways of using your mind. Thousands of techniques, very clear. And the first mode, which is the one that the world thinks of as meditation, the world is kind of vaguely known these days in psychology as mindfulness. So it's really crucial to understand what this technique is, and we began to discuss that last week at the end of the class, and I think we even finished with a couple of minutes of it. But basically, the term, these two modes of meditation, if you've studied your Buddhist literature, you listen, you hear the Sanskrit terms for these two kinds of meditation. One is called, in English it's called calm abiding. This is the name of the technique, the first technique, and it's known in Sanskrit as shamatha. So this is like the end result of the technique. The mind has accomplished this subtle, super-focused, single-pointed concentration. The second mode is known as Vipassana in Sanskrit. So in the world, there's it's almost like its own religion now. There's a type of meditation known as Vipassana, and organizations that teach Vipassana. They're Vipassana meditators, they say. So Vipassana just means insight. Well, I think Lama Yeshe translates it in his Mahamudra teachings, which is a particular kind of way of using meditation. The Tibetan equivalent, Hlaktong, is they call it special insight. And so Buddha taught many techniques for how to get insight. Now, again, I don't know in English, I don't know in Russian, but in English, in many languages, this word insight, there's no real equivalence, So it sounds a bit like religious and mystical. But in English, it's a very practical word. Insight, inner seeing. It's very simple. So we know very well when we understand something, that's an insight. That's what insight means. You get it, not just intellectually, but experientially. You just say you've been thinking about a problem. And we'd say in English, oh, I thought about that and I got a bit of insight into the meaning. It's a very practical word. So clearly we have to ask the question, what is Buddha wanting us to get insight into? What does he want us to understand? I mean, this is so clear, it's so practical. Well, this gets us to understand the Buddha's view about why we're suffering. He's saying, basically, he's saying that in our mind, all these neurotic, deluded states of mind that he says we can get rid of, he says that they are causing us to not be in touch with how things are. That's their key function. One term for these states of mind is disturbing emotions, and that we understand. Check the last time you were jealous, depressed, angry, anxious, you were really disturbed. That's one of its key characteristics. We all know that. But the deeper point about this, and that's where this word delusion comes in, and I'm sure we mentioned that. Did we go into the meaning of that word last time, Diana? Just nod. We did, good. Again, I think in Russian you haven't got a proper equivalent, right? Okay, but in English, again, it's a great word. When you are delusional, you are not in touch with reality. It's such a clear thing, you know. So when you've got a serious mental illness and you think you're Mozart or you can fly in the sky, that's when in English and psychology they say you're delusional. But the Buddha is essentially saying the extent to which we have attachment, anger, depression, anxiety, jealousy, and these are the emotional ones, is the extent to which we are not in touch with reality. So this is the absolutely crucial thing to understand in Buddhist psychology and in Buddhist philosophy. This is what Buddha is saying. So basically, then meditation, there are formal ways of learning, of using your mind. And this is what meditation is. It's, you know, in general, the job to change your mind, you can do it while you're sitting on the toilet. You can look at your anger and think about it while you're driving the car. You know, that's what developing insight means. You're using your intelligence to think through a problem and try and solve it. But what these meditations are here are formal techniques where, you know, you see a person sitting cross-legged with their eyes closed. Obviously, you can't sit in the car cross-legged with your eyes closed thinking about your anger. You'll crash. But it doesn't mean you can't think about your problems. It doesn't mean you can't get insight. And it doesn't mean you can't be focusing. But these two types of meditation, they're referring to two formal techniques, formal ways of developing your mind. You know? Okay. So the first one, like we discussed, shamatha, calm abiding. Concentration meditation, you can call it that. Concentration meditation. The world knows it as mindfulness. I mean, I don't want to use that term here because there's many interpretations of it and it'll just be misleading. But like I mentioned last week, remember, in the third category of all these states of mind, according to Buddhist psychology, which I like to call the neutral states, because, the Buddhism, they call them neutral, but we think that means they're not important. It doesn't mean that. It means they're neither negative or neurotic, nor positive. You know, love is an example of a positive state of mind. Attachment is an example of a negative state of mind. There's this clear distinction. And this is crucial to our practice as Buddhists, to learn to distinguish between these different kinds of states of mind. Yeah, the third category, these neutral ones, or I like to call them mechanics, whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need these working. Good attention, intention, discrimination. One of them is called mindfulness. So we've got many definitions, but all mindfulness technically is like I mentioned last week, is the capacity to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. So as you cultivate calm abiding, that's what you're cultivating, the capacity to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. That's it. At some point, as you get really sophisticated in calm abiding, you've perfected mindfulness, so you don't need to practice it anymore, but your mind gets more and more subtle. So it's like a neutral state of mind. It's not a virtue in its nature. So I'm not going to call the meditation mindfulness at all. I'm going to call it single point of concentration or calm abiding. It's the first mode of meditation. Now, the other problem is in the modern world, we think that's what we think meditation means, and that's it, But for the Buddha, it's simply like, you've got to, you have a knife and you need to sharpen the knife. Well, what do you do with the knife once it's sharp? You cut things. So having the mind single-pointed, what do you do with it once it's single-pointed? You use it to get insight. So to think that you just need calm abiding is just utter nonsense. It's just nonsense. It's very nice. It's got good benefits. You get a very focused mind. It brings much bliss. It makes you more clear, but you don't get insight. You've got to do the work of getting insight. You've got to use this microscope of your mind, which you cultivate in calm abiding, to then unpack and unravel all the nonsense in our mind so we can get insight into how things exist. That's the point. That's the whole point of it all. That's the whole point. So one of the techniques, the Buddha taught, which is what's popularly known in the world as Vipassana, insight meditation, on the basis of getting some focus in the first mode of meditation, you then use it in the second mode, and then you do, and this particular meditation that's very well known, and I never do it, I don't know, but it's a Buddhist teaching, is you learn to scan the different sensations in your body. So that is what the technique is. So what are you getting insight into? We call it insight, but you've got to know what you're getting insight into. Buddha's not interested in you knowing about your body. Who cares? He's using this as a tool to help us get insight into the fact that everything is impermanent. So impermanence is his purpose there. It's just the method he uses. So it's not to in our culture, we get so caught up in our body. We're so obsessed with our body and how our body feels, So doing insight meditation and scanning the different sensations of your body isn't to learn about your body. That's not Buddha's job. It's to begin to realize that things change moment by moment. And that's impermanence. So that's what Buddha's fundamental first teaching. He wants us to get insight into the fact that things change. And why? Because guess what? Right now, one of the many delusions in our mind, one of the misconceptions in our mind that is the source of so much of our suffering is that we believe completely in permanence. Intellectually, we know things change. But the ego grasps frantically, as Lama Zopa says, as we grasp at this permanent me, permanent this, permanent that. So Buddha's first teaching, his first way of getting us to get in touch with reality is to start to realize, guess what? Everything is impermanent. It's the nature of reality. And so that first type of Vipassana technique is a method to help us do that. It's just one of the many things he taught. Now, in the Mahayana, if you've studied the Lam Rim and you know the Mahayana path, and you'll know that the two modes of meditation, they are taught at the end of the path in the Bodhisattva path. And the last two of the 6 perfections are these 2 modes of meditation where we cultivate and perfect calm abiding and we perfect special insight. So in this context, the insight we are trying to cultivate is insight into ultimate reality, emptiness. And that's another whole discussion, But the point is to get beyond getting insight into emptiness. We've got to try and understand in a very simple, down-to-earth way the function and purpose of these 2 kinds of meditation. And it's so hard for us because we have such concrete views when we hear the word meditate. We really have so many misconceptions. Like I said last week, we think it's an alternative, the first kind of meditation, let's say, concentration. We think of it as an alternative to a pill. We only do it when we've got problems. Like if I'm in love with my boyfriend, like I said last week, and we're happy, and someone says you should meditate, we would laugh. But why should I meditate? I'm happy. So we really have a default assumption, which is utterly mistaken, that you only, when you have serious problems, you then learn to meditate. That's why we think it's an alternative to a pill. That's why we think it's to make all the thoughts go away because we can't stand the pain, That's why we think it's to have a vision or have some special experience. I mean, this is just kind of like naive to think like this. Okay, so like I said last week, concentration meditation, and we'll do some more today, and I'll talk about, and there's different ways to do it. There's so many ways you can do it. But essentially, it's a training. And this is the point. It's a training. You're training your mind, in particular, the part of your mind called attention. You've got, like I said, in the third category, the kind of the mechanics, you have many parts of your mind all working together. In fact, every second, right now, many parts of our mind are working continuously. But we're not discussing the brain. But because we don't pay attention to them, it's only when they stop working that we notice. So we've got the ability to not forget what we're doing. We've got the thought that there's one called intention, there's one called attention, there's one called discrimination. These are working every second in our mind, all doing their job beautifully, so that we can have a normal experience of sitting here listening, of going to the toilet, of washing the dishes. They're working continuously. And so in Buddhist psychology, when we study this in depth, and it's very, very fascinating. It's amazing the way the mind works. That's the epistemological model of the mind. It's totally fascinating. How the mind functions and the way we cognize. It's truly fascinating, But we just take it all for granted. It's only when it stops working that we have a problem. So the concentration meditation, calm abiding, is where we need to train our mind to stay focused. Now, in the most ordinary sense, forget spiritual teachings, you think, why should I do that? It's a practical issue. Get it out of being spiritual. Think of it in a practical sense. Well, it's obvious. If you're trying to make a cake, And you start to get all the components, the flour, the eggs, the chocolate, whatever's there. But you keep forgetting what you're doing. That means you've got no mindfulness. Mindfulness is not forgetting what you're doing. So if you haven't got mindfulness, if you keep forgetting what you're doing, you will never get a cake. It's called, when you're seriously old and ill, that's called Alzheimer's. That's called, dementia. When your mindfulness is completely gone, short-term mindfulness, when you don't have, I've got one of my sister's husbands has now got this, and he doesn't remember moment by moment what he just did. That's completely gone. His mindfulness, his ability to remember what he's doing moment by moment has completely finished. That's insanity. We know. And but right now we've got some of it. That's how we manage to do anything in our lives. We manage to make a cake and drive a car without forgetting. We're not doing too badly. But we need to cultivate it, that mindfulness and the attention and all the other parts, which we'll discuss, to train them in a much more powerful way so that we can develop really powerful, more subtle focus, more subtle ability to not forget what we're doing. Why do we need to do that? So we can unpack and unravel our mind, begin to distinguish the neuroses from the virtues, begin to look at all the misconceptions in our mind, begin to look at all the emotional, the disturbing emotions, begin to look at all the delusions in a very sophisticated way. And this is a totally internal job. The mind is what does this. So right now we can see, if we, besides going to the breakfast and driving the car, we manage very well. But look at our mind when we start to notice. It's complete chaos, isn't it? Look when you're trying to get to sleep one night. You can't believe your mind. You think you're going crazy. The mind never stops. It's like 1,000 thoughts a second. Now, because in our culture, in psychology, we just consider that's normal. Because why? Very simply because in modern psychology we do not have any techniques to enable us to steady those crazy thoughts, to begin to get, we don't have techniques. So this is why now, the last 50, 60 years, especially in the modern world, Buddhism has become so popular. So this is now very popular in many, many countries, using some aspect of this concentration technique known broadly as mindfulness. Lots of people, and many people have made up their own versions of it. Nothing wrong. So the real job is to get this concentration. This is what so to really do that properly, you'd need to give up sex, drugs and rock and roll. Give up your husband, give up your mortgage, give up your children, your job. You best to become a monk or a nun. You live in vows of morality. You go find a place equivalent, literally the mountains or metaphorically, and you be there for 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and you will accomplish single point of concentration. Amazing. So maybe less than 1% of modern practitioners might do that. We've all know some people who do that. They go off to the mountains. One of our monks, Venerable Rene, who's been doing this for like 40 years. He comes in and out of concentration meditation and his other retreats, and he teaches, so he's around, But he's lived years and years and years. And there are many, certainly my friends, Australians, Americans, I don't know any Russians, I'm sure there are, who are seriously doing this concentration meditation technique. And on the basis of this, getting insight into all kinds of other things. So this is the quick way. It's just like if you want to become like, I don't know if you've got any famous Russian tennis players. I don't know their names anyway, but let's pretend you got Federer, that Swiss guy, If you want to become like Federer in tennis, you can't just play tennis 5 minutes in the morning every day and then go on with your life. You've got to sacrifice your wife, your children, your husband, your mortgage, and then you'll become like Federer. Then you can win Wimbledon or the US Open or whatever it is. So that's the analogy for here. So to go and be a serious practitioner and get single point of concentration, so you can realize emptiness, so you can get bodhicitta, you've got to give up sex, drugs and rock and roll. Unless you come into this life already highly realized from doing the work in a past life, then you're different, So most of us will do it as part of our daily life. We'll be sort of 1 day a week tennis players, and that's perfectly fine. We go at our own pace. So given the fact that most of us are not going to be doing serious concentration meditation 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for several years, which is what you would need to do to accomplish it, since most of us won't do that, then we try to see, what's the purpose of doing it? If I'm never going to get concentration, what's the purpose of doing it? Well, you get some concentration. You get better than nothing, So Okay. There's certain things I want you to understand before we even do them, right? I'm not sure if I'm going in the right way that the Discovering Buddhism notes say you should go, but what to do? We'll cover it all in the end, okay? So the crucial thing to understand is I want to try and mystify these techniques of meditation to try and get us to understand how simply it's us using our mind in a particular way. So when you think if you think that insight meditation in the Mahayana is referring to getting special insight into emptiness, that seems a bit daunting. It seems a bit, oh my God, how can I get that? I don't even understand emptiness. So how can I do insight meditation? But it's more broad than that. The general idea of concentration is to focus your mind. Why? So that when you do try to sort out your mind, whether it's formally in meditation, and this is my point here, or in the car while you're driving or while you're doing the dishes, because your mind's always working. We know that. We're trying to harness this mind of ours. We're trying to learn baby steps, step by step, day by day, to learn to harness the energy of our mind, to begin to become familiar with what on earth is going on in our mind. And that means becoming familiar with it, using the Buddhist model, means distinguishing between the neurotic thoughts and the valid thoughts. So right now, it's not as if, like I use the analogy of in a garden, you've got your weeds and you've got your herbs. Now, if your weeds all grew down one end of your garden and your herbs grew down the other end, it wouldn't be difficult to distinguish between them, would they? But no, it doesn't work like that. Your weeds and your herbs all get tangled together and they all grow mixed together. Now, if you don't know botany, you look at your garden, you will never identify a weed from a herb, will you? This is a really simple analogy, but it's a very good one. You never would be able to identify the weeds from the herbs. Now, concentration meditation is to help you focus so that when you look at your garden, you've got good concentration and you can see all the shapes and all the things, and you can even do a drawing of your garden. But what if you don't know botany? That's what insight is. If you don't have an interpretation of what you're focusing on in your mind, if you don't know how to identify anger, if you don't know how to identify love, just like if you don't know how to identify a weed or a herb because you don't know botany, well, if you don't know Buddha's botany, if you don't know Buddha's psychology, if you try to do insight and try to work out the meaning of things and try to work out what anger is and what love is and how to sort your mind out day to day, forget about insight into emptiness, then you won't know how to look into your mind, because concentration is not enough. Being able to focus on your garden is not enough. You have to imbue that focus with intelligence. You have to learn botany. And these two together is the two modes of meditation together. Concentration is not enough. It brings great benefits. Lama Yeshe talks about it in incredible terms in his Mahamudra book, which is a method of realizing emptiness based on the two modes of meditation. It's a particular kind. And he talks about the benefits of getting samadhi, the benefits of shamatha. I mean, they often don't talk about this in the text because we get so excited. I mean, you can't imagine the benefits of concentration. You'd be an extraordinary person. But this is still not the point. It's like a bonus. Having bliss every second is marvelous. Who doesn't want bliss? But we get so caught up in the world, can get so caught up in thinking that's the point of meditation that you forget the purpose of it. Because concentration can bring the mind to become very calm, very steady, very clear, brilliantly clear. You can even get clairvoyance. Your mind is so sharp. But that's not enough. You've got to use that focused, sharp, focused mind to then do the second mode of meditation, either formally on your cushion or in your daily life. And this is what I want to stress here. In your daily life, you use that focused mind to think things through. This is what you're doing to get insight. So insight into impermanence, or insight into the meaning of karma, or insight into the way the mind works, insight into emptiness, insight into compassion. We need to cultivate all of these. And you need concentration to help you accomplish it. So we don't just, because in the text, in the Lam Rim, it mentions insight into emptiness. That's the final one. But it doesn't mean you don't use it to get insight into everything else. So now, if you've studied the Lam Rim, one more complicated thing here now, not complicated, but I'm trying to get you to be clear. we talk about analytical meditation. I don't know if many of you have studied the Lamrim, but you must have. Some of you, surely you have, yeah. So you're going to hear that in Tibetan they refer to analytical. There's two kinds. They say there's two modes of meditation: concentration and analytical. So we get very confused. Well, what's that got to do with insight? We'll say. Well, it's very simple. Analytical analysis is a fancy word for the verb to think about something. To think about something. It's just a fancy word. It's probably whatever Greek or Latin, Greek. But it just means to think about something. And then you think, oh, meditation is to think about something. How boring. I thought it was more exciting than that. So the second mode of meditation, the first mode is not discursive. It's focus. You don't cultivate thoughts. You don't involve your mind in thoughts. You try to calm the thoughts down long term. It's focusing. It's get a sharp, non-conceptual state of mind eventually. And that's super brilliant. So now you use that in the insight mode. If you're doing it formally, let's say you've been to your karma, let's say you've been to your class, let's say after, you've been to your class on karma, you've taken all your notes, and you go home and you will then do your homework. Well, your homework, the way we say it in the West, in our culture, homework here means you'd sit down, you'd get some focus, you'd do meditation, you'd get your focus, and then you'd use your focus to go to the second mode of meditation, and you take your notes from today about karma, and then you would think through what you've just heard. Now, we call that homework. Well, they call it analytical meditation in Tibetan, which we get all confused about. It just means you're using your focused mind to think through what you have just learned. And you know perfectly well you do that. If you've studied music, if you've studied math, what does your teacher say to you? She says, go home and do your homework, Robina. And what she'd say if she's a Buddhist is, go home, Robina, sit down first and do the first mode of meditation, get some concentration, and when you've got a bit of concentration, to the degree that you've got it, you now go to the second mode and you will use your intelligence and you will do some analysis of the things I've just told you, and this is the point now, what will come from that analysis? You'll go, oh, I get it. That is an insight. You don't make it fancy. Even if it's just 1 + 2 you're studying, 1 + 1. You got the penny drops, as we say in English. Oh, I get it. I understand. That's the insight. So you get levels and levels and levels of insight. The same with studying music. The same with studying math. Here, we're talking about studying Buddha's philosophical view of the universe. Familiarizing your mind with those views until eventually it becomes your experience. That's what the word to meditate even means, to familiarize. So it's not these cliched ideas we have about meditation, You've got to really understand the meaning. The first kind is you get your focus. It has got great benefits, no question. They're like a bonus, but they're not the point. The point of focus is to use it in the second mode. If you're doing it formally, like after you've listened to your class on karma or emptiness, you would then meditate on it. You would familiarize your mind with it. And obviously, the more concentration you have, the more quick that you can train yourself in that music. If you can't concentrate, you can't study that music. You can't play the piano for more than 5 minutes. You'll get forgetful. So the more you've got concentration, the better you'll make the cake, the better you'll play the music, and the better you will get insight into the meaning of the various things you're trying to familiarize yourself with as a Buddhist. This is the function of these two modes of meditation. I hope it's clear. So don't mystify them, please. So the kind of meditation we did, I think we did a brief one at the end, didn't we? Did someone remember? I forget. I think we did one at the end. We just did a few minutes of concentration, and we used as our object of concentration, we use the breath, which is one of the first ones that Buddha teaches. But as we get more advanced in concentration meditation, we might use the breath in the beginning, but eventually you need to use an object of concentration that isn't physical. The breath is still the body. And as you progress in concentration, you get to a point where you go beyond the body, you go beyond the concepts. So you need something that's internal as the object, but we won't be worried about that at the moment. So there were a couple of questions from last week that I think that are relevant to what we're just saying right now. So let me just mention them. Well, somebody asks about the methods for monks to use to control sexual energy. Well, you just control your mind.
То есть мы говорим о контроле.
What?
Are we in the mode of questions? Because I came here to translate questions. No?
You don't need to. Just do it in the usual method. Because I've got the questions written here. It doesn't matter. Just do the usual way.
Okay.
So according to the Vajrayana system, there are very sophisticated methods where the great meditators control their physical and mental energies. But that's super advanced. The way a monk or a nun or a human being, anybody, uses to control sexual energy is to work on their mind. This is Buddha's fundamental teaching, because sexual energy is physical. But by working on your mind, you control your physical. And that's a whole other discussion. So, for example, we believe in our culture that poor men, for example, have no control. Poor men can't help it. If they like girls, they see a cute girl and they go crazy with all their sexual energy. No, it's because there's uncontrolled mind. The cause of suffering is attachment. So attachment in the case of sexual attachment, let's say a boy likes a girl. What the suffering is, it's not the body. The body is just the symptom of the problem, but it's a shock to us in our culture. We think the body's the problem. No, the mind, when the mind has attachment, when a boy, let's say, has attachment for a girl shape, his mind is berserk because his attachment is over-exaggerating her deliciousness. So then, because in this Vajrayana model they describe the mind and the physical energy are intimately connected, so when your mind is attached, the wind energies connected to that get all berserk. And that's why, things happen. So it's by working on your mind, you control your body. That's fundamental. Well, person's asking about when person's harmed you. That's really, I know I want to answer that, but that'll have to come later. I won't forget it, but it'll come as we progress in our talks, because it's not the total point here. But it's okay. They want to know about when people have harmed you, Things are difficult. People have misused you.
Вот, Рабинова, можно ли задать вопрос?
Who's talking now? What's happening? Who was that? What happened then? Diana. Huh? Please answer me, somebody. Nobody.
Somebody just has access to microphone, so.
Okay, fine. We're fine.
Somebody wants to ask the question.
Not now.
Not via.
Not now.
Text by direct.
Not now. Okay, we leave it for now. So we'll discuss all this one later, because it's not the topic here. Okay, I will discuss it later. That came from Riva. I will answer it later, Riva. So now from one here, how do you help a person who has negative state of mind? That's compassion wing. We're trying to say there's two wings of the bird, wisdom wing and compassion wing. The wisdom wing is what we're discussing now, how we work on ourselves. The compassion wing is how we help others based on how we help ourselves. So that will come later, Anastasia. Now from Vita. Okay, good. This is a relevant question here. What is the difference between soul, body, and mind? Well, we discussed this last week, the body and the mind. They're completely different. But soul is this added component. The Greeks call it an essence. The Christians call it a soul. The Muslims call it a soul. Some people call it a spirit. The Hindus call it an Atman. Buddha doesn't assert a separate component, basically. But his interpretation of mind, as I've already shown, is way more radical than the way we say the word mind in the physical world. When we say it in the materialist world, we mean the brain. That is not Buddha's use of the word at all. His word mind or consciousness is referring to our intellect, thoughts, feelings, emotions, psychosis, compassion, love, clarity, unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, this entire spectrum of our inner being. This is what Buddha refers to as our mind. And it includes, he doesn't use the word soul or spirit at all. So mind is not physical. And then you've got your body. So for Buddha, you've got your mind and your body. They are utterly interconnected, but they're distinctly not the same as each other. That's the clear point in Buddhism. So then Denis asks, what is the mind between incarnations? Okay, the mind, if we take the Vajrayana model of the mind, we've got gross consciousness, which is how we function day to day now, on the basis of our gross body, this bag of bones. Then we have subtle consciousness, which is what's functioning when we dream. And when you're a great meditator, you're able to access clearly and consciously your subtle consciousness, which doesn't depend upon a brain. And then that's inextricably linked with a subtle level of physical energy. And then you go to very subtle consciousness, or the clear light consciousness. And that's inextricably linked with the subtlest level of our physical energy called the wind energy, or prana. So that's what leaves the body. It's very subtle consciousness, and it's programmed with all the karmic tendencies. And that then is programmed, and it will take another rebirth. That's what goes from life to life, your very subtle consciousness. That's the way they talk about it in the Vajrayana. Yes, of course, Maria, there is much discussion about, as I mentioned before, the different chakras and all that business, but that's from the Vajrayana. It's not part of our discussion here. I might touch on it occasionally, but there's a whole, in the most sophisticated, I mean, this is the source of all these teachings. If you've heard about chakras in your life, honey, it's come from Tibetan, it's come from Vajrayana Buddhism, which is coming from India, and it's only really extant in Tibetan Buddhism. So if you've heard anything about chakras, and of course it all came from the Hindus before that, but the Tibetan Buddhists are the ones who still completely keep it intact as an entire body of philosophy and knowledge and practice. Yes, it's huge in Buddhism, in Tibetan Buddhism, in Vajrayana Buddhism. So Irina asks, I don't know, Irina. Irina says that sometimes after my practice, there is such a feeling of loss of interest or meaning, I don't know what you mean, darling, and joy and sadness from everything that you see in yourself and your... Oh, sweetheart, in general, I'm thinking, Irina, the point I think I'm hearing from yours is the more we learn to meditate, which means the more we become familiar with our mind, the more we're going to see the chaos. So it can seem like sometimes one day you might feel very happy, one day you feel very depressed. This is inevitable because we've got no control over our mind now. And one of the results of getting concentration, even some semblance of concentration, is that we become more in control of our emotions. I mean, we now are just like babies. We go from pillar to post. A happy thing happens and someone smiles at you, you get happy. You know, there's an ugly sound and you get sad. We're up and down like yo-yos. We have no control over our mind now because it's not the way we think in modern world. We're too obsessed with the outside world. And as soon as we start to learn to get concentration, learn to focus the mind, we become more familiar with our mind, and slowly, what we do is we get insight into how to handle our mind, how to control our mind. And this is the point. And almost for this next weeks that we're supposed to be talking about meditation, if we can talk about this, you'll understand, you know. This is the result of learning to meditate. We become more familiar, more focused, and hopefully we become more in control of our thoughts and feelings and emotions. That means we become more in control about our happiness and suffering. Right now we're just these victims of circumstances because we don't pay attention to the mind, you know. Okay, that's about it. The other ones, I won't forget you, the other questions. Or maybe the one about helping others. We'll discuss all that later. Okay, we'll leave that for now. Okay, so I'm wondering now, based on what I've just said this morning, this last 45 minutes, Diana, are there any other questions there? And if there aren't, that's fine.
Yes, I see several questions. So
just say them. Just let me hear them all briefly. Can you sort of? I want to hear what people have to say, but just say them to me now, Diana. Let me hear them.
Can the mind calm down if we just concentrating on it? Because it seems like an endless process. Next question: how can we progress in meditation? How can we understand that we have to? And how can we understand that we have to become to some subtle object instead of breath? How can we concentrating on breath, and how can we pass to other
Okay,
objects?
so then that'll do for
And
now.
then
Leave those
there
two
is
for
someone
now.
who is not, who does not agree with you because the subtlest mind does not depend from our brain. So how
What you mean, a person
how it can get imprints and inside that if it does not depend on our brain.
the third,
and our,
this third question first. That's the
Так вот,
What?
тогда я начинаю с последнего вопроса, где Анна пишет, что она не согласна с Рабиной. Можете сами прочитать. Okay.
So you go back to the Russian mode again. Okay.
Так, я сейчас ухожу опять в синхрон.
Okay. So the third point, the third question is, that's the materialist point of view, that we need a brain. But what I'm trying to explain here is that the Buddhist view does not discuss the brain. The Buddhist view of the mind is it is not the brain. Now, as I've mentioned, we have grosser levels of consciousness. So yes, you're absolutely right. The level we function at now definitely depends upon the brain. But we are talking here the Buddhist view that asserts much subtler levels of mind that do not depend on the brain. So you have to posit that possibility in order to understand what I said. That's all. Because obviously, we're positing here that the question was that what goes, what reincarnates. So clearly you can know a brain doesn't reincarnate. So we obviously have to posit something that isn't the brain. It's clear that can go from life to life. That's the Buddhist view. It's a very different model. So the two other questions, the second one, well, it's like, how do you get better? How do you go from a gross object to a subtle? How do you get better at meditating? I mean, why do you ask that? How do you get better at anything? How do you get better at tennis, at walking, at riding a bike, at thinking, at playing the piano? Anything you do, it's called practice, honey. It's not mystical. So you practice. If you've got some instructions from Bach, you start learning the C major scale, you do your arpeggios, then you do all your chords, you do all your scales, and you get better and better and better at it. So you learn more sophisticated music. It's completely obvious. Well, it's exactly the same here. But you've got to have a good technique. Many people think of meditation as some hippie, trippy thing that you close your eyes and something magical will happen. That's ridiculous. We've got very precise, laid out series of techniques in Buddhism, I'm talking about them generally here. But like anything, you keep doing it, but you need to do it on the basis of proper instructions and have proper teachers and who know what they're doing. You don't just, close your eyes and cross your fingers. It's really obvious, isn't it? And the first one, I forget the first point, so say it again, Diana. Something about the mind.
So how can the mind calm down if we're just concentrating on, if we're just observing it? So it seems like an endless process.
Okay, there's masses of ideas, you've got masses of assumptions in that question, aren't there? You have an assumption that when you look at, your assumption about your mind is based on how it is now, which is how all our minds are now, because we've never practiced, and it's chaos. It's total chaos. Yes, absolutely, I agree with you. And it is indeed endless. But, if there is a technique, that what we're discussing here are proper techniques that are more than 3,000 years old to help you calm it down. It's not an endless process. If it's an endless process, don't do it. If, that's like saying, oh, how can I make a cake? It's an endless process. You have to have proper techniques. So here in Buddhism, there are proper techniques. And like I said, like some of these meditations come from these Indians before the Buddha, 3,000 years old. Shamatha was made up by these Indians 3,000 plus years ago. So the techniques are all there. And like, as I said to the person of the second question, if you get the techniques done properly, you learn them properly, and then you will gradually get the results. But honey, don't hold your breath. For you to calm your mind down, as you're asking, you need to have really subtle concentration. I mean, it might occasionally occur. One day you might have a nice meditation, or you just might feel more calm one day. But we have no control over it because we're not practiced. So yes, the mind is chaos right now. And then you say, how can you calm your mind down? Well, that's not the main goal of this meditation. I mean, in the long-term result, yes. your mind will be blissfully calm, but you can't expect it first day. That's like thinking, you go onto the tennis court for the first time, you've never played, tennis before, and you're disappointed you can't play like Federer. That's absurd. So you've got to learn the techniques, and then this is the difficulty, and this is, I think, implied in your question, and this is part of our problem, a major problem, is that when we do have problems in our mind, which is much of the time it's happening, but we're not paying attention, but it's only when the emotions are raging to the surface and you're freaking out, jealous, angry, upset, hurt, depressed, anxious, and we can't help but noticing the pain, noticing the chaos. So that's when we think, oh, well, I'll do meditation, it'll all go away. You'll be disappointed. It's very simple. So part of the point is this. If we are confident that there are techniques, in, let's say, Buddhism, as we're discussing, that eventually when you are accomplished, will bring these results. I mean, it should take you several years, but it doesn't mean it'll take you several years to become like Federer, but it doesn't mean you can't pick up the racket and do a little bit today and get some result. So you've got to be much more humble and know that even a tiny little of looking at your mind, already you've got some skill. So part of this process demands that we have to learn to live with our chaotic mind. We can't bear the pain, so we think, oh, well, I'll meditate, it'll all go away. This is nonsense. You will be very disappointed. So part of the process is, just like if you're playing tennis, it'll be several years before you're as good as Federer. But once you've got the techniques, you've got the good teacher, and it's possible, then you will persevere. And you will persevere even though you can't play hardly any tennis today. You'll still be happy with your progress. So it's a whole attitude that I'm trying to describe. We have to learn to recognize that our mind is chaotic now, and we know there are techniques, and we know that it's going to take a while to develop them, but we practice with patience and humility every day, and then you'll have a different attitude towards the chaos. That's the best I can say there. So everything is up to whether you think there are techniques. If you just think it's hit and miss, you just cross your legs and cross your eyes and hope for the best, or close your eyes. No, forget that. We're talking clear, precise techniques here. I mean, all I can do is talk about them, but they're all there for you. We can taste a couple, but in the end, you've got to do it yourself. That's the point. And that's why you have Buddhist centers, hopefully, where you can learn these things and start to do them yourself at home. That's when you do them. Like Any more questions there, Diana? About meditation?
Yes, there's also continuation from, so several questions. If we work with our mind, we change our neural links or neural relations between. Do we? Do we start to control our mind, or do we change our mind when meditating? Are we controlling or changing our mind when we meditate?
I understand. Okay, leave that one. I'll answer that one now. Okay, thanks, Diana. Okay.
So. Вопрос от Елизаветы на него.
Okay, so what do we? This is where we have to understand what we mean by the mind. Do we change our mind, or do we? Even what does that mean? Change your mind. This is where, if we start becoming familiar with all the thoughts, basically it's all thoughts. From the second we wake up in the morning until the second we go to sleep at night, we know that if we listen inside, we're going to hear endless, uncontrolled, seemingly irrational, disconnected thoughts. And we don't seem to have any control over them, do we? And that's what we think is normal, just to have this uncontrolled thoughts all day going off here and there. So that's how it's happening most of the time. But if it's not very strong emotion, then you don't notice. But it's only when you get angry, when the emotion comes of anger or hurt or jealousy, then we hear our head is screaming, isn't it? So it's all thoughts. What we're trying to do, hear the word Buddha. We're trying to eventually get rid of all the angry and neurotic thoughts. This seems insane to us in modern psychology. It doesn't seem possible. And then we're trying to develop to perfection all the positive thoughts. In other words, even if you're a little bit practiced, How you would be this. You would have less jealous thoughts. You'd have less angry thoughts. You'd have less depressed thoughts. You'd have less anxious thoughts. You'd be more in control of your thoughts. You know, you'd have more kind thoughts, more intelligent thoughts. Quite literally, that is the product, that is the result of practice. So you are consciously changing your thoughts. So how does that look? Let's say whoever's my boyfriend, and he does something mean, and I get angry, and it comes out of my mouth. How dare you do that to me? Now, that's coming from thoughts, isn't it? And that's called anger. So I have to be able to recognize that. Best is not to say the words. This is the perfect practice, is to hear the angry thoughts in my mind and then to do my analysis of them. And this is what's hard. This is how we use the insight mode. You do analysis of all your crazy thoughts. So right now, the anger in us, let's say, is so strong, it seems like a joke to say that I can change it. Part of the problem is because we think it's physical. But the anger, the physical feeling of anger, is just the tip of the iceberg. And underneath it, deeper down, which we never pay attention to, are the angry thoughts. And they're habits in my mind. So when we understand that anger is a response when my attachment doesn't get what it wants. So basically, I've got to hear the attachment thoughts, which are this constant assumption that I must get what I want every second. That's always there. And then the moment my boyfriend does the ugly thing, anger arises. How dare he do that? Well, how dare he do that? That's called anger. So I have to hear that thought, and I've got to analyze and argue with those thoughts, because the Buddha says it's not valid. This is not easy. And that is based on the assumption of I must only get the nice things. I only deserve the nice things. So by understanding more attachment, this kind of assumption that I must only get the good things, and then the anger, which is the response when I don't get the good things, then we have to hear those conceptual stories. This is like Buddha's botany. This is Buddha's analysis of those two states of mind. That's very specific to Buddhism. So with having that understanding by studying Buddhist psychology, then on the basis of concentration meditation, you then notice your thoughts before they vomit out the mouth, and then you do the insight part. This is everyday normal life, and you argue with them, and you lessen those stories, and you can conclude, and you can literally learn to change your anger and eventually you stop it. But this is a slow process. This is a really slow process, but this is what being a Buddhist means. Being your own therapist, as Lama Yeshe said. So concentration is simply this technique we use to help us become more sharp and focused, so that in daily life we notice what we're thinking before it vomits out the mouth, before we want to kill ourselves or our boyfriend. It's a long, slow process. It's quite precise, because emotions are just the physical expression of thoughts. This is what's surprising. Buddha actually is a cognitive therapist. It's a really sophisticated way of understanding all the conceptual stories that underpin our emotions. So meditation is not some magical technique. It's training your mind to stay on one thing, so that in your daily life, you're able to use that focus to pay attention to what's happening in your mind. This is the day-to-day job of being a Buddhist, quite literally. The words sound simple, but it's kind of a lot of unpacking to do, a lot of unraveling to do, because we take our emotions for granted, you know. So yes, we literally, first of all, first level of us, we literally learn to reconfigure our actual conceptual stories, which then eventually informs our emotion. And this is how you get more happy. You become more stable. You're not just a victim of what goes on in your head, because you're noticing it and you're working with it. That's the end result in a day-to-day sense of getting some concentration. That's the purpose for getting concentration. And in a more formal way, you sit down on your meditation seat with subtle concentration, so you can get insight finally into how things exist finally. And of course, this is a more sophisticated way of doing it. I hope I'm communicating. Another question, Diana.
The next question. Can we influence our motivation using these meditations? Can I switch to another also?
Influence.
I influence our motivation using this meditation.
No. Motivation comes first.
Нет, сначала мотивация, то есть через медитацию вряд ли мы можем повлиять на медитацию. Вопрос от Адрианы.
Motivation is why you do something, is your reason for doing something. So that's got to come first.
Наоборот, мотивация должна прийти первой, потому что это смысл, зачем вы это делаете. So next question is from Anna, she's continuation. So subtlest conscience does not depend from the course, so this way we do not have to change anything. It's useless, but
I don't understand a single word Anna's saying. Is Anna here? Can she talk to me personally, please?
А вот Анна, которая задала вопрос, вы здесь присутствуете, вы можете напрямую говорить со мной, спрашивает Робина.
Where are you, Anna?
Анна, покажите себя, представьтесь. Включите свой микрофон.
She must be there because she's asking questions. There's Anna.
Потому что
talk
такие
to me,
вопросы
Anna.
должны быть здесь.
Okay, there she is. I can
Вопрос.
see her. Please talk to me, Anna. Unmute yourself, dear.
Включите микрофон.
Unmute. There you go.
Включите микрофон.
Now,
Можете, пожалуйста,
talk to
поднять
me.
руку?
What's your question?
окей.
I don't speak English.
Then fine, speak
I'm sorry.
Russian. That's why we have Diana. Come on. Go,
Сейчас будет
talk.
дискуссия.
Tell her to talk.
Я буду переводить в последовательном режиме, ничего страшного. Вы появитесь, главное.
А я появилась, я машу рукой.
Good. What's your question, honey?
Ага.
Мой вопрос такой: если тончайшее сознание не зависит от грубого сознания, которое опирается на наш мозг, тогда мы ничего не можем менять.
So
Зачем
if
нам тогда
there's no
медитировать?
connection between the subtlest conscience and the coarse conscience, which actually is related to our brain, we cannot change anything. It's impossible.
But who says there's no connection? Why did she assume
Кто
that?
сказал, что нет связи между тонким и грубым уровнем сознания? Этого не было,
That's
кстати.
irrational.
подтверждаю
Of
тоже.
course it's connected.
Вы сказали, что тончайшее сознание не зависит от мозга.
You said that the subtlest conscience does not depend from our
No,
brain.
precisely, it doesn't. That's right, exactly. That doesn't mean it's
Да,
not connected.
от мозга не зависит.
Okay, so try. All I can do, Anna, all I can do is present to you the way they describe it in the Vajrayana, and
Ну, все, что
see
я
if you
могу
can
объяснить, это
comprehend
как
what
они...
I'm saying. So
Сейчас я
we've got,
перехожу обратно на телефон.
okay, we've got different levels of cognition, and cognition is the function of mind. Okay, so we've got different levels. And so the way they describe it at this, is we've got gross consciousness, which is the level of consciousness that indeed does depend inextricably and is inextricably linked to the gross physical, which includes the brain. And that's the level of our sensory consciousness. And then we can see at our level of conceptuality. This depends upon the brain. Absolutely, they're inextricably linked, but they're separate phenomena, but they're inextricably interdependently linked. The gross level of body, which includes the brain, and that enables the gross level of consciousness. So now, we then have subtler level of consciousness, and this is not posited in the modern world, not posited in neuroscience. But they're looking into it. They're having all these marvelous conversations with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and they're learning to look into this, and this is the worst. The world is open to these ideas now. So our subtle level of consciousness, is including the mental, but and there's a subtler level of physicality. This is not the neuroscientific model. And the subtle level of physicality is a subtle nervous system, the subtle wind energies coursing through our different, it's a bit similar to acupuncture and the Tibetan medical system and the Ayurvedic. It's a very different model. But then we have very subtle consciousness when all the grosser levels have ceased. And this, at the time of death, this is a gradual deconstruction of the gross to the subtle to the very subtle. So when the subtlest level, when all the gross levels of Anna, all the conceptuality, all the sensory, the body, the brain, when they're dead, and your mind is still existing at a more subtle level, and there's no evidence of it. If you saw a dead body, you wouldn't know if the mind was still there, although there are methods for understanding this. So the mind keeps deconstructing ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, until eventually it's a continuum, it's a spectrum of the same mind. It's Anna's mind. It's a continuity. The grosser level, the subtler, the very subtle. And then at the time of death is when that very subtle consciousness leaves the body. So they're linked insofar as they're just different levels on the spectrum of Anna's mind. But the brain stops at the fairly gross level. Once you've stopped breathing and the world thinks you're dead, you're not dead for Buddhism. Your subtle mind is still functioning. I hope that helps, Anna. Okay, it's a very different model. Thank you so much. So Diana, another question. Any more questions there, darling?
Another question is, can we switch to insight meditation directly from the level of concentration that we have, and training and concentration and analysis on parallel? So, or do you recommend to first reach some level of concentration and then to switch to insight meditation?
Yeah, that's exactly how you do it. Go back to the Russian mode. That's exactly how you do. In other words, you're training. Yeah, go back to the other mode. You just do it all simultaneous. Yeah. So then, what you're doing is, let's say you've just you've done your course, you've got your teachings today on karma or impermanence or whatever the topic is that you're studying in Buddhism. So you go, and this is, I'm being colloquial. This is how a Tibetan Buddhist would do their homework, quote unquote, in the sense that I'm talking. And you understand what I'm saying. So you go home, you sit down. Obviously you need to have the room to be quiet. If there's chaos all around you, it's very hard to concentrate, it's obvious. So you tell your brothers and sisters to shut up, or you'll tell your husband to be quiet, or you close the door. So then you sit down first and you get your mind into some focus. Let's say you've done a bit of meditation every day. Maybe you can begin to get some focus. So the first one is you're training yourself. So you train yourself, you go to the level of concentration that you've accomplished. Maybe you've accomplished the first of the 9 stages, which is pretty advanced already, I tell you. So you sit down your seat, and if you've got that level, you'll quickly go to that level. So to the degree that you've got concentration, you then stop when you've got to the point where you've got a bit of focus at the level you've accomplished. Now you go to the second mode, and now because your mind is focused and you've got all the right conditions, you now take what you studied that day and you use your ability to analyze it. That's what the Tibetans call analytical meditation, but don't make it fancy. It's just called thinking about it. You think about it, and because your mind's focused to whatever level you've accomplished, you then to that degree, you are able to think about it, and the penny will drop, as we say in English. You'll get some insight. It will go into you and become experiential. That's why the real point is insight into karma, insight into the mind, insight into all the components of Buddhist philosophy and psychology. That's the point in the end. Like if you're studying music, the point is to get insight into the theories so you can play it. If you're studying cooking, the point is to get insight into the theories and the recipes. The concentration is merely a method to get you to be focused so you get insight quickly. The point is insight. Now, if you've done masses of concentration meditation in retreat and you've actually accomplished the 3rd level, well, then you will go sit down after your teachings and you will quickly get your mind to the 3rd level of focus, and then you will go to your insight. So as your concentration keeps developing over days and weeks and months and years, and then as you hear more and more teachings, so your insight grows in sophistication and becomes more and more powerful. But the concentration is the key to success. And that's just how you'd study music or math or anything else. Don't mystify it. But here, of course, we're talking about internalizing Buddhist view of the universe. Hope that makes sense. That's exactly how you do it. You use the 2 modes of meditation like that. So what happens, even more than that, what happens is this, Let's say you're, you've got your focus to whatever degree, then you go to the second mode and you use analysis, you use thinking, and you go through the things you've just heard in the class today, maybe it's on emptiness, and you're thinking it through, and that's what analysis is. And then what'll happen, because you're familiar with it a bit, you'll go, oh, I get it. And what you'll do then, you'll catch and hold that feeling of it, that insight, and then you'll go back to the insight, back to the concentration mode, and now you'll concentrate on that insight. Now, maybe it lasts for 1 minute, maybe it lasts for 30 seconds, maybe it lasts for a flash. So you hold it, and then when the flash goes, when the insight goes, you then do the analysis again. So you go back and forth with these 2 methods. I mean, it sounds very technical, but it's very natural when you understand, until you've perfected concentration, so you can easily get insight. I mean, all the lamas say we can't get far until we've got shamatha. I mean, don't be depressed about that. But it's reasonable. When you've got shamatha, when you've got single point of concentration, you can get realizations easily, because your mind is so sharp, so focused, so undistracted. And as I said, we can't even imagine the levels of focus that we could have, It's very amazing to hear. It's very inspiring. Then it's easy to get insight and easy to have perfect memory. You'd memorize it all. You'd be brilliant. You'd be so intelligent when you can focus your mind, But don't hold your breath. It's going to take time. So enjoy the process. What else, Diana?
So then from Dinara, there's using meditation, can we correct or change our karmic imprint, our karmic
tendencies? That's okay, I understand. Now again, I think
to some things, just how our karmic imprints, or maybe we use some other techniques for that.
No, you see, it's again all these questions. With respect, they're indicating a real confusion about what meditation is. That's all I can say. As I just said it before, maybe what I answered just now might help Dinara. That concentration, which is the first mode, is simply a technique to make you focused. It's not magic. So, of course, with the more focus you've got, obviously it affects your karma because you can change your mind. And karma is what you do with your mind. Karma is what you do with your mind. So when you've got focus, you're very clever. You can do lots of things. But it's not as a magical technique that'll change karma. That's meaningless. You can't talk like that. Your mind changes your mind. Concentration just gives you the ability to do it well. That's all. Your mind is what creates karma, and your mind is what changes it. But concentration gives you the skill to do it better. That's all. But concentration itself can't change karma. That's meaningless. You've got to use the mind to do the work. What else?
So
that's all.
When we work a lot on concentration for some time, at some moment we have the control of our mind. So how can we simply understand that we do not control events around us? When we control our mind,
good. Okay.
Do we not control also the what all that happens? How can we calmly agree that, however good we are with our thoughts and with their control, everything is so impermanent and uncertain, and every action can be mistaken and dangerous.
Every action can be mistaken and dangerous. That I don't understand. In general, Buddha's entire point, which is implied in all his metaphysics, his practice, his method, every piece of Buddhism is all based on this simple, fundamental assumption that what goes on in the mind is the source of happiness and the source of suffering. So therefore, what Buddha is saying is, guess what, folks? We all have the potential to accomplish happiness, finally enlightenment, and to rid the mind utterly of suffering and its causes. So what comes from that is the recognition that therefore I'd better learn to harness and control and transform the mind. So yes, external events are one thing, and my mind is another. Now, right now, this is the opposite. So because right now we believe, and this is reinforced in our neuroscience, it's reinforced in our psychology, it's reinforced by our egos, that the outside world is the main source of our suffering. The outside world is the main source of our happiness. I mean, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, and this sounds very shocking, the vast majority of all humans on this planet have absolutely no idea that what goes on in their mind plays any role at all in their lives. So in other words, we are like complete victims of the outside world. We know we've got thoughts, but we think they come from the outside. We think our mother made us. We think God made us. We think our brain is our mind. We think we have no control over it. We think if it's a nice weather, of course I'm happy. We think if it's bad weather, of course I'm unhappy. We don't even think what goes on in here can be changed. We don't even pay attention to it. So no wonder we're suffering. So when we can begin to know that the mind, it's ours, it's our whatever goes on in here is our interpretation, it's our thoughts, and we can change them. And then we can interpret the world in a completely different way. But even more than that, if we take the view of karma, we come into this life completely programmed with our own past tendencies. But not only that, we come completely programmed in this life with our own past, with the results of our own past actions that will cause us to meet a horrible person, to meet a lovely person, to get $1 million, to lose $1 million. So everything, as Lama Zopa says, even long term, everything we even meet, the external environment, this too is the fruit of our actions. So for example, there are 4 results of any action. So anger, let's say killing. Well, the thought of killing, which then causes you to do the action of killing, sows a seed in your mind that will result in 4 different ways in the future. The first is a type of rebirth. So forget that one. We've got a human rebirth, which is the fruit of non-killing. But in this human life, and look at the world now, there'll be 3 other results of that tendency to kill. Your tendency. You will have a tendency to keep killing. Or as well as you will get killed or die young. Now that's the external environment, isn't it? You meet a gunman on the street and he shoots you and you've never met the guy before. So we really do feel the external environment has got nothing to do with me, but you created the cause from past killing that dude. You meet him again and out of the blue, boom, you're dead, baby. That's due to your past actions. So as Lama Zopa says, everything is our own karmic appearance. So not only just right now, our thoughts determine the way things appear to us, but even what appears to us is from our past actions, our past mind. So for the Buddha, everything comes down to the mind. Everything comes down to the mind. Happiness and suffering. So we are the boss, and we have to learn slowly to get in touch with this and become the boss. That's the Buddha's view. Okay, what else? Any more about the mind and meditation?
Yes. Question that is already in English from YouTube, from Maria. What is the best time for the day for the meditation?
Okay. Again, it's a question of what kind of meditation we're talking about. So,
Вопрос про
go back to the Russian version. So, Diana, it's better for everybody. So, if we're talking about formal meditation techniques, then clearly it's good to, and this is always helpful. We are creatures of habit and form, aren't we? So this is what we're going to talk about too in this series of classes, how we set up a schedule, So we all need structure. We like structure, and it makes us feel like we've accomplished something. So I think and all the lamas will say this, and this is everybody I know who's a Buddhist. If you're doing your job properly, you're doing it like this. You start your day with a practice. Even if it's 5 minutes, when you wake up in the morning, you start even from the moment you wake up. If in general the whole job is to gradually transform my mind from neurotic to blissful and happy and then to an enlightened mind, you've got to start with a formal structure. So it's really good you start with something, even the moment you wake up. As soon as you come back into consciousness, you can start practicing right then. You can, you think about impermanence. I'm still alive. How amazing. I didn't die yet. You can, whatever level of practice you've got, maybe you can start with a mantra or a certain prayer. Depends on how much practice you've got. And then you get out of bed, and then the first thing you do, this is a really ideal practice. The first thing you do is, you go to the toilet, wash your face, whatever, and then you'd have if you're a Buddhist, let's say you're already a Buddhist, you might have an altar, with a Buddha statue on it, and you do your water bowl offerings, if that's something you do. Now, if you don't do that, then at least the first thing you do is you go to the toilet, and you then maybe get yourself a cup of tea or something, and then you'd sit down and you do a practice. First and you set the day in motion. You do it first. Because we're all lazy, and as soon as we don't do it first, we get so busy, we'll say, oh, I'll do it later, and within a week you've forgotten. Oh, meditation, what's that? You forgot all about it. So it's a really good discipline to start the day. So if you're a long-term Buddhist, you might have 2 hours of practice every morning. You do that first, you know. You do it before you do anything else. You get out of bed, you go pee, then you wash your face, you get yourself a cup of tea or whatever, or the first thing you do is you make your offerings on the altar, if that's what you do. And then you get your cup of tea, and then you'd sit down and you do your morning practice. Best to start the day. The mind is freshest then, and it's a really good discipline. And then, of course, if you're busy all day working and doing all your business, then fine. You can even sometimes, like some of the centres, and now the centre, in Santa Fe here, they're starting a thing of a midday meditation, 30 minutes. They've got express meditation, 30 minutes starting a day at morning, but also they're providing a 30-minute meditation at lunchtime. I know a centre in England did that, because they're in the city, so they'd have a 30-minute meditation for people during their lunch break. People love this. Just to take quick 30 minutes, You can do that if you want to. It's up to you. There's no law that says you should. And then the end of the day, you finish with your meditation. That's a perfect day. But it's up to you. Depends on what you do, how much meditation you do. I mean, if you're living like, now with a pandemic, and I'm usually travelling, all over the world, constantly travelling, living in aeroplanes, going to different houses. But now I'm stuck in one place. So I'm here most of the day. So the traditional one is sometimes you have 4 sessions a day. That's a really good way to divide your practice. So it's up to your lifestyle, what you do, but and how much practice you've already accomplished. It's up to you very much. But morning is always best. If you just do 1 session a day, morning is best. Or a little bit, and the best is to finish something at the end of the day. Kind of like 2 bookends for the day. You motivate at the beginning of the day to watch your body, speech and mind, to do the best you can. And the end of the day, especially if you learn the purification practice, which is brilliant, And that's probably something we should do over these days, is do some of these different meditations. There's different kinds of meditation, I'm supposed to be doing that as well. It's my job. I haven't done it yet. We'll do something today. We'll end up the session with something today as well. So by the time we finish, we will have tried about half a dozen different kinds of meditations. I hope that answers the question. What else?
So next question from Dinara. So we have practices like Vajrasattva and 35 Buddhas. So how do they work? Do they purify our mind, or do they purify the effects of our negative karma?
Well, that's the same thing in the end. That comes to exactly the same meaning, but that's a good question. You say it in Russian. Tell them. I'm assuming you're telling them now. I'll be quiet for a second while you tell them. I can't see Diana again. The light is shining in my eyes. There she is. I can go now? I can talk? Okay. So this is exactly. So there's, see, in the beginning I wanted to try and get clear the meaning of this meditation. And maybe I say too many words and it's still not clear. I'm so sorry. But gradually it will be. There's got concentration meditation, which is getting your mind focused so that you can do the other kinds of meditation better. That's all. The point is inside. So, okay. Now there are 2... Generally speaking, as you know, if you read the text, you'll see there are two kind of things you're trying to accomplish in your daily life in terms of your practice. One is you're trying to what they call create merit, and the simplest way to put that is you're like trying to grow the flowers. You're trying to grow love and compassion and virtue. You're trying to kind of make the mind more conducive. The other one is you want to purify, and that's like pulling out the weeds. Okay. So there are lots of practices, and as Dinar just mentioned, 2 of them are very typical purification meditation practices, the Tibetan Buddhists. And many of these practices also come from the Vajrayana because they're including visualizing the Buddhas in this bodhisattva aspect. So they mix it up a lot because, So those practices, the way Lama Zopa describes these practices, he says they're just inconceivable in how they help purify our mind. So this is not too complicated if you think of the idea of pulling out the weeds and growing the flowers. The bottom line is you want a garden that's completely full of divine flowers and herbs. That's it. No weeds, thank you. Weeds are finished. That's like Buddha. Rid of all the rubbish, full of all the goodness. So some practices do lots of weeding. So at the very beginning, especially the very beginning level of practice, which is related to karma, you're trying to You've got to, we're trying to grow flowers, or you're trying to get wisdom, we're trying to get insight, we're trying to develop understanding. Well, that's like growing the flowers. How can you do that if your garden is choked with weeds? So lots of practices are specifically to put atomic bombs under the negative karmic imprints to clear away the weeds so that we can get more insight, so we can grow our wisdom. This is really important. So the practice, you mentioned Vajrasattva, that's one of the Buddhas in Tantra, but the practice itself is actually called the Four Opponent Powers. And it's this practical psychological process of first regretting all the negativity that we've done because we don't want suffering, having compassion for those we've harmed and taking refuge, doing a particular meditation. The third step is doing a particular visualization and saying the mantra, and the fourth step is making the decision to change. It's really just a very practical psychological technique for dealing with negative karma, negative actions. And as Lama Zopa says, we're insane not to do this practice every day. So certainly we'll do this practice in one of our sessions, for sure. I'll guide that. So the other one is a practice that's coming from the sutras, and it's a recitation of the names of the 35 Buddhas. It's a very ancient practice. It's in all the sutras, and you recite that while you're doing prostrations. So that's said to be a really powerful purification practice as well, because you're using your body and your speech and your mind. Because we create karma with our body and our speech and our mind. So we purify it by using our body, speech and mind. So all these practices are very popular among Tibetan Buddhists. And anybody, many people have these as part of their daily practice. So that's the answer. I hope that helped. And we'll do all these we'll do a little samples of these meditations before we finish throughout our days together. What else, Diana?
Else, so can we say that the habit of explaining things and perceiving things is somehow is the karma? So the way we explain things to ourselves, is this the karma?
Well, okay. I don't think we talked about karma last week, did we? Do you remember, Diana? I don't remember. We did a bit, didn't we? I can't hear. Never mind. So we'll just talk about karma now. Okay. The word karma means action, literally in Sanskrit, action. But the real meaning of this word is mental action, what the mind does. So everything we do with our body, speech and mind is an action. That's how they call it. And so the Buddha's view is whatever we do with our body, speech and mind, none of it goes astray. Everything is stored in our mind. Nothing goes astray. So it starts with the mind. So there's many of those, remember those mechanics of our mind that I mentioned? There's many of those, intention, attention, discrimination, all these ones that are there. Some of them are there every single second. And intention is one of the major ones. It's always, and intention literally means volition. I will. So, the thought of cake arises in my mind, and then the decision, I will get cake. So then my legs will stand up and take me to the cake. My legs will not move until of the thought I have, I will get the cake. So every second of the day, look at us, we're doing and saying things all the time. Most of the time, we're not even conscious that intention is there driving it. And why? Is because most of our intentions are totally instinctive. We're totally programmed, totally instinctive. So that's why a person will naturally steal or naturally lie or naturally be loving, because they've programmed their mind in the karma or intention of being loving, of stealing. And much of what we do is instinctive. We don't even question. So that's why we've got to unpack and unravel our minds and start being in charge of our minds, so we can change our intentions and change our karmic imprints and radically change our mind and therefore our future experiences. So karma, then Buddha's saying, everything we ever think and do and say, starting with a think, leaves seeds in the mind, program us. That's it. It's very simple. So given that everything that's a negative action of body, speech, or mind will ripen as my suffering, and I don't want suffering, I'd better learn to stop doing the negative ones. And everything that's positive, body, speech, and mind, will sow a seed in my mind that will ripen in the future as my happiness. Then I'd better learn to consciously do the good ones. So we're really our own creator, as His Holiness and Dalai Lama said. Karma is self-creation. We're in charge. We don't think we're in charge, but we have to learn to be in charge. That's exactly what we're trying to do. All of which implies an incredibly sophisticated control over the mind, which is why we meditate and why we purify. So, if everything that happens to us is the fruit of our past actions, intentional actions, and we don't want suffering and do want happiness, that's why the very first level of practice, meditation really fits. There's junior school, high school, and university. The two, the Lamrim is the lower scope, middle scope, great scope. I like to say junior school, high school, university. Well, meditation comes in high school. Learning to work on your mind is more sophisticated. The very first level of practice, when we learn about karma, junior school, entry level, grade 1, Buddha's not even talking about the mind yet. He says, hey honey, how about controlling the servants of your mind? How about controlling your body and your speech? That's what the junior school level is. You begin to harness your crazy body and speech, so like we know when you first learn Buddha's teachings, we learn about these 10 non-virtuous actions that Buddha recommends we use. He's not the boss, he's not a creator, he's not going to punish us if we do them, but he's recommending. And the first 7 of these are the body and the speech. So he recommends we don't kill, don't steal, or don't take the ungiven, is how they say it in Tibetan. Don't lie, and don't jump on the wrong partner. Don't use your body. Don't misuse your body to harm others sexually. 4 of the body, and then 3 of the body, and then 4 of the speech. Don't say words that aren't true. Don't abuse people. Don't talk bad things about people behind their backs, and don't just go blur about nothing. 4 of the speech. So, like I might have mentioned last week, Jesus also says this. A good Muslim would say this. A good communist would say this. So you've got to look at the reason why Buddha exhorts us not to do these things. This is the crucial piece in Buddhism. Buddha's not a creator. He's not a boss. He's not a punisher. He's not a rewarder. He's not threatening us. He's like a doctor advising us, that because he has found that these actions, the negative actions, they're the heaviest ones because they harm others, are the actions that will leave a seed in our mind that will ripen in the future as my suffering like that. So the first main motivation at the very beginning of practice is self-respect. It's like, why do you stop eating sugar? Because you don't want diabetes. No one criticizes you for being selfish. Well, the Buddha's the same. Don't kill, Robina, because guess what, honey? That sows the seed in your mind to get killed, to die young, and to have environmental sickness. I mean, look at COVID-19. COVID-19 is the environmental karma of collective killing over many, many lifetimes. So we've got the karma of the type of rebirth, and our rebirth is the result of non-killing, so aren't we lucky? Then we've got the tendency to kill, which is called the intention or the action similar to the cause. You get born in this life with the habit to keep doing it. The third one is it happens to you. You get killed or you die young. Look at the world. Babies die. 5-year-olds die. Happy people die. Healthy people die because their karma ran out. Their petrol tank of morality ran out. So that's the third kind of result of killing, the experience similar to the cause. You get killed or die young. The second one is you have the tendency to kill. And the fourth one is called environmental karma. The very physical world itself harms you. You might have allergies. You might have, you'll die if you eat a peanut. Look at COVID-19 now. You kiss your sister and you could die. You get COVID-19. So she's the environment for you. So the way the environment is, the main cause of that for you, past actions. The way experience is similar to the cause, how people see you and treat you, main cause of that, happiness and suffering, is your past actions. The main cause of your own tendencies, your past actions. The main cause of your own humanity or your being dog or ant, your past actions. We are really our own creators. So given this, from the big picture point of view, I'd better learn to be in control of my mind. But you've first got to control your body and speech. Control the servants of your mind. I mean, as a little girl, my mother could have told me 27 times a day, don't be angry. But I had the habit to be angry. Where from? Mummy didn't teach me. I brought it with me. It was second nature. The second my attachment didn't get what it wanted, I'd punch and kick and yell, So it was a habit. So it's just too much to say to me, control my anger. At least I can learn to control my behavior. Don't punch, don't kill, don't steal. It's a powerful level of practice. That's the first level, and that's abiding by the laws of karma. Then, having harnessed your body and speech by living in vows and having a practice every day, now you can begin to really start to change your mind. That's way more sophisticated. Yeah. So, I forget the question, but I think that was the answer to it. I can't remember. I would have blown my nose. I was supposed to have a 5-minute break, I thought, at the hour, but we didn't do it, so we're nearly finished, so we better continue. So, there's one meditation I'd like to talk about. There's lots of techniques the Lamas all do, but in the end, they're two modes. In the end, they're focus, they're non-discursive, or they're discursive, one or the other. That's it. Thousands of techniques. And all the visualization techniques are included in the second mode. They're discursive. You're using your creativity on the basis of good concentration. So there's one technique that the Lamas all do it's actually come from Tantra. It's coming from the Vajrayana because it relates to the wind energies, this model they talk, how we are made up of the wind energies. So this technique, it's something the Lamas often would recommend you do before you do other meditations, especially your visualization meditations. And it's called the 9-round breathing meditation. And there's lots of ways of doing it, but I'll just keep it simple. So maybe I'll describe it and then we can give it a try. And this is just to help your mind, kind of the physical and the mental energies to be a little bit balanced, That's the idea. So basically this meditation is the 9-round breathing. There's different ways of doing it. I'll just say it simply. I'll describe how Lama Yeshe talks about it in his Mahamudra book. So the first 3 breaths, you just imagine all the air leaves through your right nostril. And you imagine it as like yucky smoke. And you imagine it as all your attachment. This meditation is utilizing the 3 poisons, the 3 toxic emotions. So the first 3 you visualize coming all out of the right. And then you think of it, you're using your mind, you're thinking of it as yucky smoke. And the meditation here is discursive. You're using your mind because you're wanting to purify all the rubbish, to get rid of all the attachment. So attachment is dissatisfaction, neediness, emotional hunger, always wanting something more, expecting all the time something, always looking forward to something, possessing, all of that. All of those are functions of attachment. So all that part of us, that neediness, expectation, always wanting something more, never satisfied, and then anxiety comes from this. So all that attachment energy, you want it to go, and so that your mind is powerful. So the more you want it to go, the more you help yourself. So you visualize this yucky smoke disappearing into space, not one atom left. The first 3 breaths. The second 3 breaths, it's all your aversion energy, the opposite. Aversion, attachment and aversion are the 2 main neuroses that we go between 1,000 times a day in our daily life. At a more subtle level much of the time, so we don't pay attention. So aversion too is multifaceted. The most obvious gross level of aversion is anger, shouting and yelling, The more mild levels of aversion, which we all have, but which we don't pay attention to, are irritation, annoyed, upset, frustrated. When you don't get what you want, when attachment doesn't get what it wants, you get annoyed, irritated, upset, frustrated. But we don't pay attention. We just think, it's nothing special. But it all leaves an imprint in your mind. You're programming your mind with aversion. And even more subtly, aversion is expressed internally as depression. That's internalized aversion. And what aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants, and it's 1,000 times a day. The default assumption in our mind is I want, I need, I expect, I deserve. It sounds cruel, but that's attachment. And when it gets what it wants, we get all excited. When it doesn't, we get upset, irritated, or raging angry, or depressed, because depression builds up, you know. It's built up because nothing goes astray in our mind. It all gets stored there. It all gets programmed in us. So, this time you visualize all of it, all your anger energy, your aversion energy, your depression energy, your irritation energy leaving through your left nostril, like yucky smoke. You visualize this, you want this, and you breathe it out 3 times, disappearing into space. The third 3, it's like the root delusion, ignorance, and there's different manifestations of ignorance or ego grasping. It's like indifference, uncaring, or very narrow-mindedness, ignorant state of mind. All of this energy coming out of both your nostrils like yucky smoke, disappearing into space. So that's the essence of the meditation. First 3, attachment energy. Second 3, anger. Third 3, ignorance. But you can add a component. When you breathe in, you've got to breathe in first, obviously. So the first time you breathe in through your left nostril, all the blissful, non-attachment energy of the universe, your own potential, and the blissful energy of all the holy beings, all this perfect, blissful, open, spacious, non-attachment energy coming in like blissful white light, completely breathing it in, and then you breathe out, it drives out all the ugly attachment, all the attachment, all the neediness and all the rubbish. 3 times, in the blissful light, going down, out, driving out the attachment, out of the right nostril. Then the next 3, you breathe in 3 times, all the blissful, non-angry energy of the universe, the loving energy as blissful white light through your right nostril, breathing it down into you, and then driving out all the aversion through the left nostril 3 times. And then 3 times, the third lot, in through both, all the blissful wisdom energy, the opposite to ignorance, of the universe, light, blissful light coming into you, and then driving out all the ignorance energy. That's the idea. So this is using your breath, but this is clearly discursive. You're using your concepts. You're using your mind. You're using your concepts. It's a very powerful meditation, a very nice one. And you don't do loud breaths. You do all the way down, deep to your abdomen, but not forced. So we just do a few rounds of this 9-round breathing, like 5 or 7 minutes. And if you forget where you're at to, just start again. So just get yourself, we'll start though with doing 3 minutes of concentration. We'll do that to steady the mind first, okay? So just get your bodies comfortable again, as much as you can. Get comfortable. If you can sit in full lotus position, how fantastic. Dalai Lama says it's really auspicious to be able to do that, even for a second. It creates the cause to be able to do that when you're in the most advanced tantric meditations. And it sows the seed to be able to do that. But if you can't, that's fine. 1 leg on the other thigh, if you can. If not, regular cross-legged. If not, in a chair, whatever you are. But if we're in a chair, and I'm in a chair, don't slump into the back. Okay, hold your body up. That's very important. You hold up your own body. Then you stay, but relax your muscles. So hold up your body, but relax your muscles. But your body upright. Your head slightly forward. Don't have your chin tucked in. Have your head slightly forward. No, don't have your head thrust back. Have your chin tucked in, slightly forward. That's really important. Slightly forward, okay? Chin tucked in. Your tongue, your jaw relaxed. The lips slightly apart. Tip of the tongue resting behind the top teeth, just near the palate. This is from the great yogis. When the ones who meditate day and night, it means you don't have to swallow the spit or dribble. It's very practical. And finally, your eyes, looking down beneath your eyelids, along your nose, like as if you're looking towards the ground. Now, your body doesn't meditate, but settle into this position and then forget about it, okay? So now we're going to do 3 minutes first, again, of concentration. And again, we're going to, this time, this is not discursive. This is the thoughts, this is the point here. Please to hear this. This is the point. Once we get this, it's not complicated. If you have an assumption that when you start to breathe and you hear all your thoughts, I'm a disaster, don't think that. Of course your thoughts are busy. But the difference is you're training yourself not to follow them. Let them be there. Let them shout. It doesn't matter. It's really good training. You're going to stay on that sensation at your nostrils, and you let the thoughts come and you let the thoughts go. That's the training. If you think they all should go away, you'll be disappointed. No, you're training your mind to get strong attention. You pay attention to the breath. That's it. For 3 quality minutes, okay? First of all. Just the breath, in and out. Okay, so now we change our, that was non-discursive, now we're going to use our mind. This is under the second mode. So here, you wouldn't really call it insight. I mean, we're trying to steady the mind, we're going to steady the body and the mind by using the breath. So the second mode, so now, just again, just do a few sets of this 9 rounds. The first 3, you breathe out all the yucky smoke, and it's your attachment, attachment, neediness, expectation, possessiveness, always wanting something more, disappearing like yucky smoke. The first 3 through your right nostril. Second 3, your aversion, irritation, upset, angry, despair, depression, whatever aspect you have of it, completely disappearing through your left nostril 3 times. And then ignorance, indifference, uncaring, narrow-mindedness, fundamentalism, stuck body, stuck mind. 3, both nostrils, yucky smoke. And then when you breathe in each time, the opposite nostril, the opposite energy. Blissful white light coming in your left nostril, forcing out all the attachment. Blissful white light coming through the right nostril, forcing out all the aversion through the left. And then the ignorance. Just get into the rhythm of it at your own pace. And just, so it's physical, but also your mind is doing it. It's both things, A few sets of the 9 rounds at your own pace. And if you space out and forget what you're doing, just start again with determination not to space out. Just keep reminding yourself. Okay, relax now. Let's do a little experiment. We'll do little experiments in these meditations. Okay. So just to summarize where we've been for 2 days, what we've done for 2 days. The topic we're supposed to be discussing is meditation. So what I've been trying to do is break it down and demystify it. And whether I've confused you or not, I'm not sure, and I'm sorry if I have. But basically, like I'm saying, the bottom line is the long-term result we're trying to accomplish, if we're on the Vajrayana path, is to become a Buddha, rid the mind of all the rubbish, and grow all the goodness. If we hear that, it tells us everything. It implies Buddhist methodology from the first step. If we're trying to rid the mind of all the rubbish, and this is a pretty shocking concept, we don't have that in neuroscience. And if we're trying to develop to perfection all the goodness, then it's obvious we have to know what the mind is. And then it's obvious we have to learn to distinguish between the rubbish and the goodness. This is clear. We have to distinguish between the weeds and the herbs. So that means we have to learn Buddhist botany. We have to learn Buddhist psychology. Because if he says get rid of all the rubbish, we have to know what he means by rubbish. What is ego grasping? What is attachment? What is anger? What is depression? Why is it labeled negative? Why does it cause us suffering? And the more we understand it, is then we know how we can get rid of it. Because initially it's like a joke. And that means we have to distinguish it from the virtues. Because we want to grow those. Love, compassion, intelligence, wisdom, blah, blah. The words are easy, but the Buddhist model is very specific. Buddhist botany, if you like, Buddhist model is very specific, what these states of mind are. So we talked about what the mind is, what it's not. We've got concept, and this is the part that's hard for us to hear. We think of these things as emotions. We think of them as physical. But no, the physical is just a symptom. What goes on in your body is merely a symptom of what goes on in your mind. The mind is the point, including your brain. What goes on in your brain is an indicator of what's going on in your mind. The Buddhist view is the mind is the point, which is the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, the unconscious, the subconscious. So we have to learn first theoretically to know what the hell the mind is, and then learn to know how to identify it. And that's where your first mode of meditation comes in. And because we can see our mind's chaotic, it's all over the place all day. So we've got to steady the mind, focus the mind, and that's concentration meditation. Now, in the text, these Indians invented it more than 3,000 years ago. And when you read Lama Yeshe's Mahamudra, and he tells you some of the qualities that you'd have, it sounds like science fiction to us. Just getting single-pointed concentration. You'd have absolutely effortless control over every tiny thought. When you're in meditation, you would have gone beyond the gross level. You would be totally blissful. You'd have clairvoyance, because your subtle mind has the capacity to cognize phenomena that the gross level can't. You'd have amazing qualities. You'd be a highly evolved being. But that's just the beginning for Buddhism. That's just like a bonus. They're like a byproduct of getting concentration. They're not the purpose. The purpose is to have your mind at a laser-like focus, eventually, so that you can easily do the job of sorting out the mess and distinguish between the facts and the fiction, the delusions and the virtues. That's when it would be easy for you to get realizations, easy for you to get insight into reality, into impermanence, into karma, into how things are, into emptiness, and how to distinguish between the rubbish and the virtues. That's the point of it. That's the big picture point of it all. So the second mode, a classic way of using the mind to get insight, is to use thinking. And this is a surprise to us because Ava, can you turn off your thing again? Whoever's there, Ava Thurman. Can you turn off mute yourself, please? What to do? Can someone else mute her? Can someone else mute, can the boss there? Who's there? Yeah, okay. Can you, Andre, can you mute? Oh, now you have, thank you. So this is the big picture, Concentration is this brilliant skill that enables us to see what the hell is going on in the mind based on studying, based on learning Buddhist psychology, so that we can unpack and unravel the chaos in here. So it's a long-term job, and that's the job of being a Buddhist every day. So the formal meditations are called concentration and insight. But the day-to-day, you could be applying this every second. You're sitting on the toilet trying to deal with your anger. So to the degree that you can stay focused on your crazy thoughts and identify there's anger and there's love, you just did the 2 modes of meditation, sitting on the toilet for 5 minutes. So don't think of them as some mystical technique that you've got to be having a cushion for, or your eyes closed or something. That is the formal, more powerful ways of doing these meditations. So that's how we've talked so far, basically. That's what we've talked about so far. And that'll do. 2 hours is gone. That'll do for now. I'm sure there's a million questions, so I'll just have to sort of cover them slowly, okay? Okay, people. Food for thought. Try and recall, try and remember what we've talked about, and maybe if you've taken notes or listened to it again, try and recall last time and today, and try and have the information going a bit more deeply. Try and remember what the mind is. Try and remember what the mind is not. These things we've all talked about. Try and recall this, because this will inform the next talk. Obviously, we know that. Do a bit of study between now and when I see you next. Okay, people. So we delight. And I just sing the 2 little prayers, dedication. You're going to sing the 2 prayers, Vladimir? Vladimir, you're going to sing? You're going to sing the prayers, or do you want me to do it?
You can do it. I'm not ready.
Okay, no. Okay, thank you. So we do 1 little prayer. It's called dedication. And all it's saying is, here we've been for 2 hours. As many moments as there have been is as many seeds we've planted. So we think we're going to nourish these seeds throughout the week, to watch our body, watch our speech, watch our mind, practice in meditation, do whatever, so that we can develop our marvelous potential, so we can help others. And the second little prayer, may bodhicitta, this amazing aspiration to be of benefit to others, may it grow and grow in the hearts of all. Gewadi nyududag lama sangye drobgyune drowa chikyang malupar jai sala gopashok Jang chob sem chogren poche ma kye panam ke gyochig kye panyam pa me payang gong ne gong du ha ba shok. Okay. Thanks everybody so much.